All right, guys. Uh, Here's a little idea that I had. Just kind of call it Political Science Theater 5000. Just me sitting here watching videos, commenting on them. And if you like my work, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If not, I don't know what to do for you. But yeah, I do need to get to 1,000 followers to do this stuff live stream, and I think that would be a lot of fun. So if you could just send these to your friends, send them to your friends, see what they like, uh, and maybe we can get some followers going. And we can do this stuff live stream, so you can see what I do every day, which is basically just I sit in front of a microphone and a camera and talking to the talking to the mic, rambling, and probably coming off as being completely intelligible. I don't know. I don't know. I don't. I never had the opportunity to sit and watch myself, and sometimes I wonder, did that just come out of your mouth? But this is a learning experience. At some point, I'm going to get better cameras, better equipment, and the production value go up on these things. So let's have some fun. Let's just have some fun, because there's really, seriously, what do you have to do all day long but to watch these White House press briefings? It's going to be great. She does such a good job. Kaylee does such a good job. She always comes to these things so prepared, so prepared. And the media hates her because they can't get anything over on her. So it's probably already in progress, because I had a few things to do before I started here. So it's a little late, but let's take a peek. Let's take a peek at what Kaylee has to say. Let's do this thing. So if you like these videos, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share them with your friends so we can do this stuff live.
Haley, what does the president believe is illegal about the Secretary of State of Michigan sending out absentee ballot applications, and what federal funding is he considering withholding from the state of Michigan as a result?
So, I won't get into exactly what the funding considerations are. I would note that his tweets were meant to alert Secretary Mnuchin and Mr. Vogt about, head of OMB, about his concerns with trillions of dollars going to these states, and his noted concerns about a lot of fraud that is potentially at play when you have mass mail-in voting. So with regard to the illegality and legality of it, that's a question for the campaign as to their voting and ballot practices. But I would just note that his tweet was meant to alert OMB. He wanted to be very careful as we send trillions of dollars to states that we keep this important point in mind, and we ensure that there's fairness in our voting system and absolute accuracy. Yes, Caitlin.
But the president himself has voted just 2 months ago by a mail-in ballot. There are several Republican states that are also doing these mail-in applications for ballots. And so I'm confused. What is it that he thinks is illegal that's happening in Michigan? He doesn't really specify.
So first, with regard to the president doing a mail-in vote, the president is, after all, the president, which means he's here in Washington. He's unable to cast his vote down in Florida, his state of residence. So for him, that's why he had to do a mail-in vote. But he supports mail-in voting for a reason. When you have a reason that you are unable to be present, there's right now, we're very far from November 3rd. I'm glad that you have the prediction tool and you can tell us what will be happening on November 3rd, 2020. I certainly don't, nor does the president.
Primaries coming up, and that's like what's happening in Nevada and whatnot.
I would also, I assume you care about fairness and accuracy in our elections, do you not?
Of course I do. But
Of
there's
course.
not evidence that there is
So
widespread voter fraud.
There
There's
is, in
evidence.
the state of Oregon.
You can go look this up on ProPublica.
Just
There was a
take a look at
bipartisan consensus
Facebook.
on the fact
Just
that
take a look at
mass
Facebook.
mail-in voting
Republicans
can
in
lead
this
to fraud.
state
There was a
are
2005
being
commission by none other than
reclassified as
President
independent
Carter,
voters,
who's
so
not a
they
member
can't
of the
vote in the
Republican Party,
primaries. It's happening
and also
all over
James
the state.
Baker about
There
this, concluding that these
is
ballots,
absolutely
quote, remain
fraud
the
happening
largest source of
in
potential
here in
voter
Oregon.
fraud. So
That's
this
anecdotal.
is a concern.
I
The
know
president's
it's
right to look at
anecdotal,
this.
but
We want a
there
free
is
and
going
fair
to be
election,
voter
and that's
fraud
his
all
concern.
over the
Yes,
place.
Steve?
Kaylee, on this subject and one other on a different one, the president deleted his first tweet, which alleged falsely that the state of Michigan was sending out absentee ballots to every voter. In fact, they sent out absentee ballot requests. Was the president misinformed this morning? And why is he only directing this message toward Michigan, not other states like Georgia and others that are sending similar absentee ballot requests to their citizens?
So the president corrected his tweet, as you noted, and with regard to going state by state and looking at ballots and the way they're distributed, that would be a question for the Trump campaign, and I'd refer you to the campaign on that point.
Kim, on the G7, do you have any more details on the timing when the president would like to schedule that here in Washington? And does that mean that travel restrictions that are currently in place on travel from Europe, from China, and other places would potentially be relaxed before that meeting would take place here?
So I won't get into the mechanics of how that would happen. I would note that the president really wants to see the G7 happen here in Washington as we begin not just to reopen the country, but as the world begins to reopen. He'd like to see it happen sometime in June, but as to a particular date, I don't have any announcement on that front or to the mechanisms of how we'd make that work. Yes.
Thanks, Kaylee. Couple of questions for you. One, does President Trump support the CDC guidelines that were released over the weekend? And if so, why were they released so quietly? Why not talk about them, roll them out here from the podium?
So the CDC guidelines, there was a 60-page document that came out last night that I assume you're referencing. That document, I talked to Dr. Redfield earlier today about it, and much of that was already out there. So appendixes A, B, C, and D had been out there for a while. Appendix E, he said he thinks got posted sometime late last week. And again, these were his rough estimates he was giving me. Appendix F was being discussed, and there was constructive criticism of it through the task force and the interagency process. So that was refined. And my point in sharing that with you is that the 60-page document was merely an aggregation of a lot of what was already out there. So it's not as if this was new information that we were announcing, but it was more guidance pursuant to our Reopening of America guidance that was issued several weeks ago.
The president support the guidelines? Does he think Americans should follow those guidelines, or should they be following the initial guidelines that you rolled out here from the podium?
So the president's been very clear. He supports the Reopening of America guidelines. The CDC guidelines are in concert with those guidelines. He wants to safely reopen this country. It's very important we do so, and it's good to see that most states, I think basically all of them, have plans at this point to reopen, and we're starting to see the safe reopening of several states and Americans getting back to work.
Let me just get your reaction to something. We just got moments ago a statement from the American Nurses Association which says, quote, "The American Nurses Association has not received reports from nurses or other frontline healthcare workers utilizing hydroxychloroquine as a preventative treatment for COVID-19. Why does the president continue to say that many or thousands of frontline workers are using it as a prophylactic?
Well, there is at Henry Ford
So
Hospital is
you
doing a
take
study on this now
an
where 3,000
instance of
frontline workers
one group of
will be
nurses,
taking
and
hydroxychloroquine
you attributed
to
it
look at its
to
use as a
all over the country?
prophylaxis.
Okay.
I believe there's a few hundred or 190 workers in Tampa General Hospital. So this is being used by some. And one thing I want to note with regard to hydroxychloroquine, because I think it's very important that we're as accurate as we can be with our reporting on this. Hydroxychloroquine has been a drug that has been in use for 65 years for lupus, arthritis, and malaria. It has a very good safety profile, but as with any drug and as with any prescription, it should be given by a doctor to a patient in that context. So no one should be taking this without a prescription from their doctor. But that being said, I've seen a lot of apoplectic coverage of hydroxychloroquine. You had Jimmy Kimmel saying the president's, quote, trying to kill himself by taking it. You had Joe Scarborough saying, quote, "This will kill you." Neil Cavuto saying, "What have you got to lose? One thing you have to lose are lives." And you had Chris Cuomo saying the president knows that hydroxychloroquine is not supported by science. He knows it has been flagged by his own people, and he's using it. Well, Cuomo mocked the president for this. And interestingly, I found this out just before coming here. Hydroxychloroquine, of course, is an FDA-approved medication with a long proven track record for safety, and it turns out that Chris Cuomo took a less safe version of it called quinine, which the FDA removed from the market in 2006 because of its serious side effects, including death. So really interesting to have that criticism of the president. And on that note to Chris Cuomo, I'd like to redirect him to his
That's a good
brother,
point.
the governor of New York, Governor Cuomo, who has several on-the-record statements about hydroxychloroquine, saying, "I'm an optimist, I'm hopeful about the drug, and that's why we'll try it here in New York as soon as we get it. There has been anecdotal evidence that it's promising, that's why we're going ahead." And I have about 8 other quotes from Governor Cuomo, should any of you have interest in that.
You just cited our studies, though. They're trials that are in their early phases. Do you have any evidence that thousands of frontline workers are currently using
And the
because they
president is
believe
now
it
part
actually
of
will
that
prevent
study.
them from getting
So the
COVID-19.
What
FDA
better-
has approved this for
what-
off-label use. You know, this president's a big
what
believer in
better?
right to try legislation. People who are in their last,
Thousands of workers,
there are
you're
several
saying?
studies that have been brought that the president has actually mentioned that I'd refer you to. There was one out of France, a French study involving more than 1,000 patients that found that the vast majority had, quote, good clinical outcomes, and by the vast majority, that was more than 90%. There was an Italian study of more than 65,000 patients that demonstrated only 20 tested positive of those who were taking it prophylactically, and a South Korea
This is
study
why
as
the
well. So
media
there are
hates
several
her.
studies, and if
She
you're someone
knows her
out there
stuff.
and this is a safe drug to use, and your doctor, importantly to underscore that, and your doctor prescribes it for your use as a prophylaxis or after coming into contact with COVID, then it's something you should take if it's prescribed by the doctor, and that's your personal medical choice. Yes.
Kaylee, Governor DeSantis just suggested that the president may be going down to Florida for the SpaceX NASA launch next week. Is that accurate?
So we have no news on scheduling at that front, but if I get news in the future, I will certainly provide that for you. Yes, Jack.
Kaylee, how often does the president talk to Director Vogt or Acting Director Vogt from the OMB?
To who?
To the Acting Director of OMB.
Often. He just was in the Oval Office with the president, so they do speak often. I don't have a readout of the president's schedule, but they do speak regularly.
So if he wanted to flag to him his concerns about Michigan, why didn't he just tell him instead of sending a tweet?
Because the president believes in unprecedented transparency, and I'm sure you as a journalist are very eager and excited when you learn about the president's decision-making process in real time, whether that's on Twitter or from me here up at the podium.
You just said that was
Yeah.
that was the reasoning for him expressing
I
his
didn't say that was the
concerns?
reasoning, but I'm saying this is a transparent president, and I think that that's something that you should be lauding rather than questioning as to why he decided to tweet this. Yes.
Apart from President Macron, do you have any other answers from G7 leaders that they are definitely willing to come here?
So I won't get into the president's private conversations and correspondences with world leaders, but we
Yeah,
do
that would
hope to
be
see this
like,
happen. We
illegal.
hope that.
How can you characterize the response as being great, sounds like a good idea, or thinking about it?
So I don't have any information about the response from world leaders, but we certainly hope to see this happen. Yes.
Yes, thank you. Could you clarify, please, President Trump's comments about saying that it was a good idea, it was good that there were so many positive tests for COVID-19, whereas a lot of people look at that and say that this was actually terrible, that we have actually 1/3 of all the cases in the world.
Well, look, I would note this, that the president, what he was saying there is that we are testing. When you have more cases, in order to identify those cases,
Testing.
you have to have
Yes,
tested
testing
a high
is
volume
good.
of people.
The media
So
for a
the more
long
you
time
test,
kept saying
the more
that
cases numerically,
there
not
weren't enough tests, there
necessarily
weren't
as a
enough
percent
tests, there weren't
positive,
enough
but
tests.
numerically,
Well, you
you will
can't
see
have a
just
test
by
for
volume,
something that
sheer
doesn't
volume of your
exist.
testing, and the president's done an
When
extraordinary
you
job
find
on this
out that
front.
it does
Washington
exist
Post
and you
surveyed
get the
governor's
test,
offices and state health departments and
and you
found that at
distribute
least a
those
dozen
tests, the
states
media can't
have
say that you're
testing
not
capacity
distributing
that
the
outstrips the
tests.
supply of patients.
But this was the
So that's a
narrative.
very good
There weren't
job
enough
done by our
tests. There
federal
weren't. It's all
government in
Donald
supporting
Trump's
the
fault,
states.
even
To
though
cite the
it's
governor of
hard
New York
to
again, quote, we have more
start
sites
from
and more testing
zero
capacity than
and
we're
get to
using.
390
So we're
million.
testing a lot, and
Especially
thus
when
we're
you have
finding,
to
a number of
basically get
cases,
tested
but
again week
as
after
we
week
safely
after week.
reopen, we do have some encouraging numbers on that front, that we
The
continue
number
to
of
see a
cases are
week-over-week
going
decline, a
to go up
15% decline
as
in deaths
the
in just the last week. April 1st to
testing
mid-May,
ramps
50%
up,
decline in new
and that
hospitalization
is
and
good.
under
That's what he was trying to
25,000
say.
cases
I don't know
today, so
if
we
he
are seeing progress.
said it,
Yes.
Kelly, can you tell us what law specifically the
in the
president
right way
thinks
the
the
media
Secretary of State
not
in
frame it
Michigan
as
wrote
he
by
said,
sending
yeah,
out
all
the
these people getting
applications?
COVID-19,
And
that's
did
a
the
good thing.
Secretary
No,
of
that's
State
not what he
in
said.
Georgia also break that law by sending out applications for their primary?
Again, I'd reference you to the campaign. These are ballot questions, and I'd reference you to the campaign on that.
He's the president
That's
and
my
you're
former
his
employer. My
spokesperson.
current employer's the White House, so
But-
thank you.
Yes, but that's not a campaign question. That's the president of the United
It's-
States saying that
It's a campaign
state
question on
broke the
ballot
law.
initiatives that you have and absentee ballots, so I would refer you to the campaign on that front. And I would note to you that many of those ballots that are submitted via mail can be fraudulent. I cited to you the bipartisan study. I can read it again. Maybe you weren't paying attention when I read it the first time, so I'll read it again. President Carter, a Democrat, not a Republican, and James Baker concluded that these ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. So if you cast a ballot via mail and you do so fraudulently, that would be an illegal act, and I'd point you to that. And for further, I'd point you to my former employer, which is the Trump campaign.
Is the president
Any
concerned
other
about fraud in
questions?
Georgia?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Kaylee. Two questions, if I may. Firstly, on airports. The TSA is reportedly considering setting up temperature checks at airports. Given the numbers of people who can be asymptomatic or sick without a fever, do you think that's sufficient? And why wasn't more done to have screening at airports sooner, particularly in light of the House oversight investigation that called screening from international hotspots in March limited and stagnant?
So the president is working with TSA, he's working with airlines. We want to ensure that our TSA employees are safe, that those who are traveling are safe, and he has had those conversations, and we are keeping people safe at the TSA and the passengers as well.
Over 500 TSA employees have become sick, and 6 are dead. So again, do you think this has been enough action and soon enough?
We've taken action, we're working with the TSA, we're keeping America's essential workers safe, and we are praying for all of those who have been affected by coronavirus.
And then on another front, I wanted to ask about the president's son and business partner, Eric Trump. He recently said of coronavirus that, quote, the Democrats are trying to milk this and predicted it will, quote, magically all of a sudden go away and disappear and everyone will be able to reopen after the election in November. Do you think Eric Trump's comments are accurate and also appropriate?
I think we all hope
That's his
coronavirus goes
opinion.
away, and I think as we continue to take the president and his family out of context,
And yes,
we
Democrats
should
are
endeavor
trying to milk this.
Quote them accuracy, and I think we should all hope that the coronavirus goes.
Quote was inaccurate?
We should
Because it was
all
correct.
hope that the coronavirus goes away. Yes.
Is there a timeline for when UK and European Union citizens and visitors are allowed to come back into the United States? And will all European countries be included, or could it be a case-by-case basis?
So we don't have a timeline on that just yet. I can tell you the president's preeminent concern is keeping Americans safe. His travel restrictions have saved lives, as Dr. Fauci and others have noted. So we don't have an announcement as to when we'll be rolling those back, but his priority, his number one concern is America first and the health and well-being of the nation first. Yes.
Thanks, Kaylee. A spokesman for Governor Whitmer said that she isn't planning to meet with the president and wasn't given an invitation tomorrow. I was wondering if there's a reason why
That
he wouldn't meet
Governor
with her.
Whitmer said.
Whitmer in Michigan wasn't extended an invitation to the president's appearance in Michigan tomorrow, and I was wondering if there's a reason why he wasn't going to meet with her like other governors.
I don't think there was a
Because
particular
she's
reason. It didn't come up,
insane.
but on that note, I would point to Governor Whitmer. It sounds like she's curious about an invitation, but she should be quite happy that thanks to this federal government, FEMA obligated more than $216.2 million to Michigan, 8.6 million N95 respirators, 740,000 18 surgical masks, 311,571 face shields. I should round these up or we'll be here all day. 760,000 gloves, 700 ventilators. The president has done quite a bit for Michigan, and her concern's an invitation, but she should be thanking the president for all the supplies that he's
And she
delivered
won't.
to her state. Yes.
She won't.
Yes, Kaylee, the president has made clear that he's concerned about liability issues as companies reopen now. Is the White House engaged with Republican senators about this issue? And would the president sign another bill, another COVID bill, without liability being addressed in that?
So I won't lay out the president's conditions or lack thereof for any upcoming legislation. He has mentioned it, that it's something that needs to be looked at closely, and he is looking at closely, and he is discussing with members of the Hill about that. But he has made clear in terms of a phase 4 that he wants to be slow as we approach a phase 4 and not rush forward with spending trillions more dollars of taxpayer money. We've done a lot so far, and he'll look at doing more in the future, and liability is definitely something that he's concerned about and working on. Yes. Right back there.
Oh, one more on G7. Do you think that it would be appropriate to hold a G7 summit in the U.S. while ordinary citizens are still not allowed to travel freely, for example, from Europe?
Yeah, the president wants us to start reopening. Travel restrictions are something that, he wants to make sure American lives are protected before those are lifted. But that being said, I do think it's entirely appropriate, and so does the president, to have a G7 here. America's reopening, the world's reopening. And what a show of strength and optimism to have all of the leaders of these countries come together at the White House and pursue business as usual and as we move forward through this pandemic. Is there anyone I haven't gotten to? I guess not. Okay, so we'll do a few more. Yeah, I had a brief answer to your question. So go ahead.
Kaylee, Susan Rice wrote an op-ed yesterday in the New York Times that said that President Trump has kowtowed to President Xi, and also has said that, called his response to the coronavirus deadly, classified as a deadly mishandling. What's the White House's response to
You
that?
know what was a deadly
So you said
mishandling?
that that came from Susan Rice, was it?
Let's see, 9/11.
Okay, so first I
was
would
it,
want to take a moment
2012?
to address the president's response because the president
The
has had an
embassy
extraordinary and early
seizure
response to the
that
coronavirus.
killed 4 people,
I would note, Dr.
including
Birx,
an
the early
ambassador.
work of
Yeah,
President Trump,
that
both the
was
travel
deadly.
restrictions and
That was a deadly
quarantine, has bought
response
us the time
because
and
Hillary
space
Clinton rolled over and went
necessary
back
to
to
have this
sleep,
task force
and
be
Susan
very
Rice
effective.
went
Dr.
to
Fauci
every
saying
media
that the
outlet
president's
and
response has been
lied.
impressive. You can't imagine under any
That was a
circumstance
deadly
that
response.
anyone could be doing anything more. I can go through the actions. There's a detailed timeline out there of January 6th, Wuhan issuing a travel notice issued on Wuhan when there were 0 cases in the United States. The 17th, 0 reported U.S. cases, and there were public health entry screenings at major U.S. airports. Of course, the infamous travel restrictions that were called xenophobic by Democrats on January 31st. A lot of action in February on developing a test and making sure we were moving forward as speedily as possible. On that, keep in mind in late February, Pelosi was saying, come to Chinatown, it's very safe, but the president had already taken very early action. And I know you brought up Susan Rice in that context, but I'm going to bring her up in another context that's equally as newsworthy, and that is the email that was declassified from Susan Rice on Inauguration Day, which is so peculiar. It set the scene, it's Inauguration Day, you're moving out of the White House, this is the most powerful building on planet Earth. Susan Rice is moving out, reflecting on her time here, and what is she doing? She's not packing her boxes. She's not being nostalgic about her time in the White House. What she's doing is writing an email where 3 times she writes that President Obama emphasized to conduct the investigation into Michael Flynn by the book, by the book, by the book. She writes it 3 times. As Shakespeare said, thou doth protest too much, Susan Rice. He didn't have the Susan Rice part in there, but I'll add that in. 2, she was asked specifically about the unmasking of Michael Flynn after she discussed it on January 5th in the Oval Office with Obama, after she wrote this email to herself on Inauguration Day. She was asked by a good journalist, Judy Woodruff, about this email and about the unmasking of Michael Flynn, not the email, but the unmasking. She was asked specifically about Nunes's claim specifically. So let me clarify, it was Nunes's claim. And she said, I know nothing about this, so it was a lie. And then Susan Rice, since no one brought it up to me, I will bring
She
it up
always
to
comes
you.
to
Her
these press
attorney
conferences
said
so
that this was the first
prepared.
opportunity
It is
3 weeks
just
after
funny.
this Oval Office meeting that she had to write this email memorializing her Oval Office meeting with Barack Obama discussing Michael Flynn. It was her first opportunity, she said. Interesting, because she had an opportunity in those 3 weeks on January 10th to do a passing of the baton event with none other than Michael Flynn, where she praised him, wished him success, and talked about the great transition into the White House. And then on January 12th, she was able to participate in a story that published on that date in the lifestyle section of the Washington Post. So she never had time to write this email until Inauguration Day as she's rushing out the door, when in fact she had an opportunity to do all of those things. I'll leave that with you. Thank you for bringing
That's
up Susan Rice,
because
not in the context that I wish,
Susan
but for
Rice
allowing
is a
me to share that
habitual
with you.
liar.
Secretary Pompeo.
Love this woman. I absolutely love the press secretary. Love her. Well, that's Political Science Theater 5000 for today. Y'all have a good day. This was fun. Not as fun as it usually is, but